Welcome to the Simply Be Found Huddle with Dean and Rob, where we're going to talk about generational businesses today. Inside of our huddle, we keep everything raw, uncut, and unedited. So let's go ahead and let's dive into this conversation, Dean. You happen to be part of a multi-generational business for one of your things, but did you know that there's all kinds of stats on why most of them, or how many fail? Do you know what those stats are?
You mean as far as passing the business on to the next generation? Is that so? Just clarify that.
So,
first, guess that about 25% of them don't make it.
So here's the stats. That's a good guess. First to second generation. So for the first generation passed it on to the second generation, only 30% survive.
Wow.
Now, second to third generation is 12% survival rate. Third to fourth only has a 3% survival rate.
Okay, so we've talked stats. Why do you think that happens? I have a gut feeling. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
I've personally seen it for all three of those different stats, and not from me failing inside of there, but just from different things that are in there. Because we've never inside of my family businesses, we've never passed anything on. Everybody's always started their own and done things. I've had my own businesses fail, but they were never handed over to me. But when I was doing venture capital and I was watching different businesses and reviewing, business documents of people looking either for investments in their business or they were looking to sell their business, and it was a generational thing, most of the time it's because they paid either too much money out, they never expected the person they were handed over to work in every single aspect of that business, or they didn't let them fail and they constantly pulled them back and they took too much control. And then that first generation, that whoever the business owner is that's handed it over, either passed away or had a medical problem or didn't catch it because they never let them fail. And then they say, oh, here's this business, here you go. And then they don't know how to manage it.
Yeah. No, so when you were looking at it, when they were passing it off, they were passing it off in distress. It was a successful business, right? I mean, there's a difference. I mean, I've seen people pass off a distressed business, go, I don't want to do this anymore. And the son or daughter, they go, oh, I want to take over the business, but the first generation or whatever generation had already distressed it. Is that the same numbers, or is that a little different problem?
I'd say it falls into the same category and there's also people who that own a business and they own a job.
Right.
And this travels between certain industries more than others, but they have a job, they own a business, they like the freedom of owning their own business, but if they're not there, it's not working. So then when they hand it over, especially if that person's been on payroll but really not showing up every day, that's a big problem.
I agree with you. And I'm going to throw something else out there that's a little different too, is the people that come into this country that would come from places where they can't get out of their station. They work really hard and they create a situation for the next generation to take over because you didn't have that. Now, is that kind of the same concerns, or is that a whole different? I mean,
it's a whole different animal. It's all grouped all in together for those stats. Right. And those are stats that I'm just tracking as far as, I'm tracking, our data team's tracking, as I like to know those numbers because I mean, when I'm talking to someone, sometimes I bring that up of, did you buy the business? Did you did you take it over for somebody? Why'd you take it over? Is it even something you want to do? There's times a business gets handed over to the next generation and they don't even want the damn thing.
Right. No, I've seen that, and they go, I'm doing it because mom or dad or grandma or grandpa decided that this is important for me to take it over, and they're really not interested. That's not their dream. It's not their goals in life. So I think that can also be a reason why some of those things fail, because they feel a obligation to the family to keep it going when their heart's not in it as well. But that gets to be a lot of things.
There's a lot of concepts. There's a lot of pieces. Sometimes there's a ton of debt on the company. And yes, they were paying their bills. Yes, they were making money off of it, but there's that debt hold. That takes a whole new stress.
Right.
Also, those next generations, not everybody has entrepreneurial spirit.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you have to have a certain mindset to be in business for yourself, because it isn't like you can go start at 9 in the morning. I'm gonna use the 9 to 5 game. Excuse
Okay,
me.
Dolly Parton.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have enough hair to be Dolly Parton.
You don't have enough boobs.
I wasn't going to go there. I was doing the hair thing. Come on. Anyway, but when you work for somebody, depending on what kind of, I'm not saying all professions the same way. I mean, but you can't just go to work at 9 and leave at 5 and be done with it. When you own a business, or you're an entrepreneur, you have to. It takes more than that. I mean, over the weekend, you and I both spent time doing some things, because it's required from us. But the reason why people get into jobs, I mean, that's another reason too. Let's kind of jump into that real quick. When you mentioned create a job.
Yep.
So I was privileged to be in a business that was sold twice while I was there as a middle manager, and both times was really stressful. But how many of those people that didn't get renewed with their contracts to stay with them went out and started jobs?
Quite a
Because
few.
a lot of them do. I mean,
Economic downturns actually create that a lot, because they can't find a job.
Right.
So then they're like, I'll just start a business.
Right. And people don't realize that just jumping in and starting a business is going to work. I mean, you may have an idea, but I see the more successful business. I mean, I've seen them work. I've seen people get real successful. They'll go out and they're a manager, or they know something, a special skill set, and they'll go out and buy a business. And I've seen that work.
I've seen that. I've seen people go out and buy a franchise for their kids, because their kids can't hold down a job.
Right, exactly. And then how many of those are that's not passing on, but I've seen those fail miserably too.
I've seen those fail. I mean, but a lot of it comes down to knowing how to fail and how to pick yourself up. And those next generations don't know how to fail. It's no different than inside of sports. You learn how to be able to get hit. You learn how to fall. You learn how to do those certain things to keep yourself safe. Well, that still exists inside of the business world. You have to know how to be able to manage your books, manage your time, manage your marketing, manage payroll, and be able to manage people to be able to keep the balls going. And you have to be able to pivot. And a lot of people have a hard time with pivoting. They can't pivot from one thing to the next and see trends and be able to plan for, I know this is going to be my dead time. And if you don't know those things and don't know the signs to look for, you're going to fail. Do you agree?
No, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I mean, I spent a lot of time when I first started one of my adventures, if you will. So I've had many adventures over my lifetime. A couple of them did not end up well for myself, but I found that you can seek the help or the ears of other business owners too. And sometimes, in a leads group, let's say, or something like that. I mean, you're talking about the pivot and to see trends. You need to go and listen to other businesses. They may see something or say something to you as well that are going to trigger something for yourself and say, I need to consider that. We talk about the digital marketing. We started this, 5 years ago. We talked about the digital marketing, the importance of this, and it's changed. But how many people didn't even know? I mean, I was one of them, because you came and said, Dean, how you doing? I said, I'm doing great. I didn't know. But that's the thing, is you have to be aware of things, and you have to be able to pivot, like you said, to grow your business and to make it successful. And I think sometimes when you're really in the business real close, you don't always see the pivot points sometimes as well.
And you have to have a risk level to be able to be an entrepreneur. You really do.
Right.
I mean, you have to be a little narcissistic, and you have to be willing to take some risks.
Right.
I mean, we've talked about that with personality traits a lot. And it doesn't matter what business you're running. It could be a chiropractic shop. It could be a dental office. It could be a roofer. It could be a painter. All of them are going to have different risk levels, and they're going to take risks in different spots.
Right. And, the reason why you get into business, so we're going to talk personalities. Now we're going to talk about, some people, we talked about people lose their jobs. They start a business. They buy a franchise. Some people go, they have a hobby and they go, oh, I can make a living. I can make money doing this. And it might start out as a what we call the second hustle, if you will. And they start to say, oh, I'm generating enough cash flow. I'm just going to jump into this and do this. The other one is people have a skill set. And they go, there's a demand for this. And they start a job and they do. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you get into this business. But the thing is you have to be able to take it and go with it. You have to be willing to take some risks.
Right.
You don't want to get so narcissistic about the risks you take that you're not willing to listen to other people. And you know more. I mean, I've seen this with the creative types, some of the art people that we know, or we've had work with, some fabricators. I know better than you do. You don't know what I'm talking about. And maybe I don't know the skill. I don't know how to run put two different pieces of metal together and get what you get or whatever. But there's still the concept of what it is you're selling and making sure that it's a viable product out there and you're making a profit. And so, I mean, I just went a whole different direction.
Right.
But it all ties together on the fact that you have to have a spirit of discovery. I guess that's the word I'm looking for.
I guess that would be part of it. I mean, I guess it would have to be to where you are. It depends on every single industry and depends on where you are. But I mean, entrepreneurship is not an easy task. And I always have to laugh. I was pumping gas the other day and I asked someone, start a conversation. They asked me what I did. I told them and they said, oh, I just started a business. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. How are things going? Talking. And I was like, why'd you start the business? And the guy goes, well, because I want more time.
Oh, really?
He goes, I want to be able to take vacation when I want to take vacation, and I don't want to have to worry about it. And I was like, oh, okay. And he just started a landscaping business. And I was like, okay, so how much staff do you have? He goes, well, I'm going to hire 15 people. I said, oh, you must be doing pretty good and have a lot of contracts. He goes, oh, I don't have any contracts yet. So you have a truck.
But, so here's the deal.
So, I'm like, what?
So let's take that for a second. He went out and got the staff for 15 people. He had no contracts yet. Now he has permission to take, he or she, I don't know if it's a male or female.
It was a male. It was him and his wife that started it.
Okay. But, but now you have 15 people, you have these crews. So therefore you can go out and really go after the market. But, right.
It's a risk.
Right. There's a risk to it. But you also got to remember timing of starting a business. I mean, we're in Colorado and landscape is just starting to pick up right now.
Correct.
And it takes 90 days. You and I, we've talked about the warm-up period. I mean, if you're going to start a business, do it in a strategic manner so that you can hit the ground and be competitive as well. It's almost a little late in the game for this person to jump into this, isn't it?
Not really. I mean, he pretty much has. I mean, so if you look at him, he must have money to start the business off. He must have a decent amount of capital to be able to go to or able to access capital, because he had a truck, he had a trailer. All of them were labeled and branded to him. Him and his wife were both wearing shirts that had it. They had hats on with the logo. Fancy thing. They had their website already set up. And she was a website designer before, so that's what she does. And I got to hear their whole entire story of everything they did. So of all this marketing, now they're going to go out and start flyering. And they're going to be doing the whole entire art of flyering, which I still think works. It's a great marketing tool for certain industry types. And then we're going to do all this. Now I start talking about what we do and all that stuff, which we're not going to go into. So I think they're stacked up. But he hired a manager to manage the business because he doesn't want to work in it every day. He bought all the trucks. So he bought I forget how many trucks he bought. But everybody has a truck and all this different stuff. So I'm like, wow, you racked a lot of money up into something that you don't even have a proof of concept in yet.
Wow. He started it from ground zero. He didn't go
ground zero, didn't go buy anything, didn't do anything. So that can almost be worse than taking over a generational business. Now, when I asked him, I said, do you have any experience running a landscaping company? What have you done? I've done nothing.
Oh.
I watched some YouTube videos. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so you see different types, and we see this all the time with everybody we talk to. There's different walks of life that make entrepreneurs. Now, he could either have a really successful business, or he could burn out, or he could totally financially kill himself because he doesn't know how to go out and get the sales.
Right. And I've seen people be, so we talk about this and we're saying that this person has a high chance of failure. Maybe not. I've seen people that manage people really well and manage businesses, and they go out and they just kick butt because they have a concept and they do that. That's why it's really hard to generalize.
It's hard to put a prediction piece to that. So when you do the VC world, it's really hard to be able to put a score to that. It's an art and being able to judge a personality type. But what I found really interesting about their story is she's like, well, I built this website. It's absolutely beautiful. I went to it. It's great. But it doesn't have schema set up for the data side. And she's doing social media, which is awesome. And she is not doing anything for directory. She has a Google business profile set up, but she's missing all the rest. So it's going to be one of those scenarios to where she has a web design background. She built this beautiful website. It can convert, but where they're going to start to, unless those flyers really work for them, it's going to be really hard to be able to drive more traffic. And that's why having something like the listings engine and doing all your local stuff and be able to build that up really matters to your business.
Exactly. So, I have so many things that run through my mind on that whole piece, because you were talking about doing all these things. And I when I was younger, I did a case study in a major city in the Midwest. And I don't want to throw it out there because I don't know if they pulled it out or not, but it was a person that started a vendor, like a hot dog vending machine thing, and did really well, and started out with one cart, and pretty soon they had like 50-60 carts that they were running across the city. And the next, we talk about the generational piece where they mess it up. He did all these things. He understood cash flow and all these wonderful things that went with it. His theory was cash is king, and what he meant by that is not the cash that was coming in, but the profitability is king. And the next generation came in and then tried to overanalyze everything. So we can do this, we can do all these other things as well. I know I just kind of went way around on this whole thing, but the thing is in a matter of a few months that destroyed everything. So sometimes what you were saying about starting things from scratch isn't always as bad as taking over and trying to redesign stuff.
You've got a combination. So I've got a story about a generational business. It was a family furniture store, and there was two sons. Both of those sons, one went off, served in the military, got all this education and had all this stuff. The other one opened his own furniture store, failed it, took over, was running a successful business inside of a furniture store, and the grandfather owned that business, was able to travel, go do all this stuff, buy motorhomes, buy RVs, and just reap the benefits of him running their business over time. And then it became to the point of they wanted to sell. They wanted to sell the property. They wanted to sell the business. And they couldn't get as much for it from the one son that was running the business every day. So they were going to sell it to the other son that came in and had all this educational background, could buy these loans, do all this different stuff. So it ended up causing a huge family feud for that family. The one son, he left and went and started his own other furniture store and went and did his own thing and had to start basically from the ground up to be able to get everything to get started. The one son with the military background and all this high education put his daughter in charge of running the furniture store and changed every single philosophy, the whole entire sales process, the whole entire philosophy for how the store ran, because that's what he learned inside of school. Well, it only lasted about 6 to 8 months, I think, if I remember correctly, but it ended up crashing and burning. Now the other son, he did awesome in his other business and was able to run it for several years until some other stuff happened, and he ended up crashing and burning it then. But I mean, it's one of those things to where generational businesses are very interesting because you also have the family dynamic that comes into play for that.
Right. Well, I think the other thing too is even though you hand off your business, you have a tendency to still want to stay in the business.
Correct.
And that, I think that hurts. When I first took over my family, I'm a second generation owner of a business, and when I first took over, my father would come in and say, "Oh, you're doing this wrong." I said, "Well, then I'm not running it the same way you did." But
his started off more as a hobby kind of business.
Yeah,
right?
His was a hobby business. Yeah, a hobby business. he had a full-time job, and so he ran it differently. But when I took it over, I turned it into a full-time career for myself. And so your approach is going to be a little different when you change a hobby business into a career type business. How you're going to push it forward and make changes. It's a little different, but what I'm trying to say though is I've seen other businesses where the father, there's a flooring business that I'm familiar with, and it's a second generation now going into a third, and the father, when it was struggling for a while, when the father finally let go, it's not always the generation that takes over. Sometimes it's the generation that had it that causes the problem, because
Correct.
They're saying you need to respect the way I did it. This is how I build it, and it becomes a pivot for the next generation to say, no, you saw something and you did it, and you took it this far, and you were here, but now I want to take it to here, and in order to get there, and sometimes that the generation that passed it on can't keep their fingers out of the till, and not the till, but out of the process, right. And they hurt the business coming up.
Well, there's also different generational businesses that handle in a different way, where the siblings don't agree. They both want to take over the business, and then one goes and starts a division of that business, and the other one goes starts another division, and they run as their own businesses. One might be, I know a flooring company. It might be the same flooring company, but there's a flooring company that has one of Windsor and one of Greeley, and they run as their own. They run as their own businesses, because they don't see eye to eye. One has a very high-end level. And they refer business to each other all the time, back and forth, because they have their specialties.
Right.
And they have a dynamic that they meet in the middle to be able to do it. And I think the dad started that business. And I've seen different...
I know exactly who the business is, but it's not the same business I'm talking about.
Okay. But so it's one of those things to where you could split up, and how you hand off your business is different, but you have to decide, is it going to be good for the family dynamic? Because there's times that it can ruin a family,
right,
based on how you handle it. So sometimes it's better off to piss everybody off and sell the business than it is to make one person happy and piss the rest of the family off. Exactly. Because it can ruin a family for generations.
Right. Well, the other thing too is,
I personally witnessed that.
Yeah. And I've seen things where, the first generation, that's their dream and their passion. And we talked about that before. And the next generation, that's not their dream and their passion. So their heart's not going to be in it. So at that point, you say, I'm just going to sell the business if I can. I've seen people, they can't sell it because they didn't do all the things that necessary to make it a sellable business. Because where the person that is there becomes the blue sky, or the reason why people come to them, and they don't have enough. You talked about contracts. Contracts aren't necessarily there, but if you're truly sales, that contracts is a whole nother. We'll save that for a whole nother discussion about the value of contracts. But sometimes people may come to our business because of you and I. And if somebody were to take it over, would they have the same dynamics? I mean, if say you and I want to get out of this, which we don't, we both.
We might for the right amount.
Yeah, like anything's for sale for the right amount. That's right. But the person that would buy it from us may not have the same.
Correct.
Tick. So you always count on a loss. When you sell a business, you always count on a certain amount of drop off, or it may all drop off and go away, depending on who takes over and how they're going to handle it. But it depends on the reason why a business sells too. Yeah, that gets into your VC world where you're buying debt or you're buying cash flow or whatever. Right. Yeah, that's a whole other animal. But the big thing is every business is unique, and the dream of the person running it is going to change. And I think sometimes now that I think about it as I'm saying this out loud, sometimes the second generation is trying to keep the dreams of the first generation alive, and instead of being their own creative person. And I think that, as well.
That's a huge concept. Now, you brought up something really interesting. Like, if you have a business like ours, and my mind triggered, it's really not on the generational business, but it triggered. You brought up our business. So someone in the VC world could come in, or another company could come in, and they'd say, okay, we're going to buy your contracts because your contracts have a value. Ours, right. We don't have contracts, but we have users.
Right.
or we have members. So they'd buy out those members, they'd keep everything going, they'd buy the engine. There's different pieces of our business that have value to them. But for how you and I do these podcasts, and that's how we attract so much sales into our system and into our ecosystem of our environment, you would then hire us to, that company would then hire us to come in and be part of that show. So there's lots of ways to look at your business for what is really at worth and how would you keep it alive and what parts should that person be able to do.
Oh yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I don't even know where to go with that.
My whole entire brain kicks on for that, for all the different values and how all that would end up going in, because there's lots of ways to look at it from the outside in. And there's people that do that for a living. They go through, they break that stuff down. Some of them are trustworthy, some of them are not. You have to be very careful.
Right.
But multiple generational businesses is a very interesting topic.
It is. And, you talked about the value of a business too. I mean, I just went there. I happened to be younger when a lot of these corporations were going in, buying bigger companies and then breaking them apart because the small pieces are worth more than the whole business. And that's how I ended up becoming an entrepreneur, because I was tired of that, being on the receiving end. So I came and said, I approached my father and said, Dad, I'm going to work for you for a while because I'm waiting to figure something out. And I went, I have a passion for this business that I didn't think I had. When I was younger, I worked for the business, and I went, I don't want any part of it. But then I developed a different passion. And I think that's another thing that goes into it. I mean, because the way that business was running before and where my passion went to was different. And I was able, to take it to a different level. And so I think, gosh, it's not a linear, simple solution.
It's not black and white.
No, and that's why the coaching piece for businesses is so important, because I mean, even the greatest players in I'll use the sports analogy. The greatest players in the world are being taught by somebody that's looking inward and trying to help you to understand your game,
correct,
make you better. And they may not be the same. They may not be the same at what you're doing, but they have a different perspective. They're to be able to watch you perform and say, this is what works for you, or this is something you might consider, instead of going to the left, go to the right when this particular competition comes up against you, because I see a trend or I see something they're not seeing. And when you're right there in the heat of it, you don't always see it. I know that you and I have had this conversation.
Oh yeah. It's a very interesting concept, because we offer the marketing coaching. We do some inside of the business, but we don't tie it all the way into what a real business marketing coach does, or what a business coach does. A business coach is going to look at you from a self perspective. They're going to look at your business. They're going to look at how to optimize you to be able to improve your schedule, improve your day, improve every little aspect of your entire yourself. It's going to start with you. It's going to go into the time management with your team, how you're conducting meetings, how you're doing all of that. And they break down each of those sections and they coach you based on those sections to be able to improve you. So a good business coach is going to do all of those things. They're not cheap for good coaches like that.
No, they're not.
I know I've done it for a couple people, and I'm not cheap because, and they're going to tell you stuff that you don't want to hear.
Right.
But sometimes you need that coach more than you need the person who started the business on multi-generation, because that person, you're not going to listen to the person who, is your parents and all that. You have that whole dynamic, but you'll listen to a coach that's beating the shit out of you.
Right. And you said it's going to hurt. And what's the old saying? The truth shall set you free, but it's going to really hurt.
So I guess this would have been a good topic and a good huddle for us to do around Thanksgiving and start some family feuds at the Thanksgiving table. Yeah. It's one of those things to where you have to think about what you're going to do with it and approach it and look at the marketing and how all that's going to be done. There's a lot of concepts that come into the multi-generation, but that's kind of our opinions of what we've kind of seen. Is there anything else you want to cover on this one?
Well, first off, that's our opinions.
Everybody has an opinion, just like they have an asshole.
The thing is there's a lot of opinions out there, but what you want to, if we threw one idea out at you and it struck home and you went, yeah, I see that, that's great. Because that's all, because sometimes it just takes a little spark to get the whole fire going, you know?
Correct. And if you're inside of one of these scenarios, or it's your specialty or any of that, we'd love to have you on the podcast just to talk about it. This is the kind of stuff we go over and we break down. You can listen to our podcast on almost every single podcast network, Spotify, Apple, or watch our faces and watch our actual video on it inside of YouTube. You can find the Huddle everywhere. And if you want to be a guest, definitely let us know. And I just totally lost my train of thought.
Okay, that's right. I'm sitting here shaking my head going, I would love to have an expert get on and just say, you guys are full of it.
I'd love that. I'd love to have those debates, because that brings out some of the best conversations we can have.
It does. Plus, we always get something, and we've had experts on it that said, I never thought of it that way. And then we said the same thing. We've never thought of it that way. So Correct. We both grew from that experience. That's why come banter with us. I would love to have that. I
would too. Well, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like wherever you're watching at. And thank you so much. My name is Rob. I'm one of the co-founders here at Simply Be Found.
And I'm the other guy. I'm Dean. So thanks for having us on and listening.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.